Welcome to Iraqi Dinar Update, your go-to source for the latest news, expert insights, and real-time developments on Iraq's currency, economy, and financial reforms. Whether you're a long-time investor or just curious about the dinar, you're in the right place. If the Iraqi dinar were truly a scam, it would undoubtedly be the most elaborate and bizarrely convincing deception ever pulled off on the global stage. It's almost amusing to think about how much effort, coordination, and legitimacy would have to be manufactured just to sustain a scheme of that magnitude. Let's take a moment and walk through the implications, layers, and international involvement that surround the Iraqi dinar to understand exactly why it defies the definition of a scam, and instead represents a long-term and deeply strategic monetary reform process supported by global institutions, national governments, and private financial giants. First, the entire foundation of the dinar is a scam argument begins to crumble when you examine the structure and function of a sovereign currency issued by a legitimate government. The Iraqi dinar is not a made-up currency printed by a rogue actor. It's the legal tender of Iraq, backed by the full authority of the Central Bank of Iraq, CBI, a real institution with public records, global financial partnerships, IMF compliance, and foreign currency reserves. The currency is used in daily commerce, regulated by law, and recognized by governments around the world. This simple fact already separates it from any conventional definition of a scam, which usually involves fake instruments, non-existent products, or fraudulent systems. The Iraqi dinar, whatever your opinion on its future value, is as real as any other developing country's currency. And then comes the international involvement, not just in the past, but continuing into the present. If this were a scam, then one would have to explain why global financial institutions like JP Chase have been involved in Iraq's financial redevelopment. This is a bank that operates with extreme caution, subject to layers of due diligence, regulatory oversight, and institutional risk management. JP Chase was invited into Iraq by the U.S. Treasury to help restructure and modernize the country's financial and payment systems, including assisting in the reform of public financial management. Are we to believe they signed up for an elaborate hoax? Are multinational legal departments and global financial strategists all in on a ruse? That stretches credibility beyond the breaking point. Consider also the reported involvement of Donald Trump. During his presidency and afterward, Trump emphasized Iraq's oil wealth, strategic importance, and potential as a reconstructed powerhouse in the Middle East. If the Iraqi dinar were worthless or part of a scam, why would someone like Trump, who is obsessed with deals and outcomes, associate with it or comment favorably on Iraq's economic potential? There were reports that under his administration, the U.S. was examining ways to leverage Iraqi economic assets, including oil and financial instruments, to offset war costs and secure strategic interests. That's not the kind of engagement you see with a so-called scam currency. Then there's Warren Buffett, often considered the greatest investor of all time. His investment decisions are slow, methodical, based on deep value analysis, and require long-term fundamental strength. If Buffett bought dinar, even as part of a speculative hedge or through a related vehicle, that would imply serious due diligence was performed. Again, Buffett doesn't do scams. He buys undervalued assets and sits on them for years, sometimes decades, until the market catches up. Even the suggestion of his involvement points toward belief in underlying value, not fraud. Moreover, if this were a scam, how would one explain the investment of time, money, and political capital by countless parties inside Iraq to manage the dinar? Local banks, private sector businesses, foreign contractors, central bankers, and international advisors have all worked to align Iraq's currency with its broader financial system. Why continue this level of activity over decades for a worthless currency? Why promote digital dinars, cross-border trade infrastructure, and integration into the Arab payment system? Why would Iraq's economic advisors argue for the return of the dinar to international platforms like Forex if the entire exercise was an illusion? The answer is obvious, because the dinar is real, its reforms are real, and its re-emergence is planned, not imagined. Critics often focus on the fact that the Iraqi dinar is sold at markup in certain places, particularly through dealers targeting retail investors, and this is where the scam label usually sticks. But this is a mischaracterization. The issue isn't the dinar itself, but how it is sometimes marketed, often irresponsibly. There's a big difference between overhyping a legitimate asset and fabricating one out of thin air. The currency is legitimate. The abuse lies in misleading claims about overnight riches or guaranteed revaluations without basis. But this dynamic isn't unique to the dinar. It happens with penny stocks, gold, real estate, and even cryptocurrencies. The asset class isn't the scam, the promotional tactics are. Another point often missed is the question of timing. Those skeptical of the dinar tend to dismiss it simply because it hasn't revalued yet. But global monetary reform does not happen on a set clock. Iraq has gone through war, insurgency, foreign occupation, sanctions, civil unrest, and regional instability. The currency reform program is naturally going to be long, incremental, and dependent on both domestic and international factors. The fact that we haven't seen an overnight shift doesn't mean it won't happen. It just means that the timing hasn't yet aligned with the conditions required for a move to a new exchange rate. And that's a financial reality, not a con game. So when people say if it's a scam, they are doing a lot to keep up appearances. It's not just sarcasm, it's actually an indictment of the scam narrative itself. Because they really are doing a lot, not for show, but because Iraq is preparing to return its currency to international recognition. There are countless indicators, de-dollarization initiatives, new lower denomination note designs, electronic payment rollouts, regional banking partnerships, and clear statements from the CBI and government advisors about revaluing the currency as part of national economic recovery. In closing, the Iraqi dinar is not a scam. It is a long-term speculative investment rooted in the reality of post-war economic development and monetary reform. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme, and no serious analyst should treat it that way. But it is also not a hoax, and to call it that is to ignore the monumental effort of a country trying to rebuild itself and rejoin the global economy, step by step, with real partners, real money, and real reforms. The only real unknown here is timing. But the fact that so many credible institutions and individuals are watching closely, or even investing in it themselves, tells us all we need to know. The Iraqi dinar is not a fraud, it's a financial waiting game. Thanks for tuning in to Iraqi Dinar Update. If you found this content helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a beat on Iraq's evolving financial landscape. Stay informed, and stay ready.